started, welcome to the session on refactoring to modernize Java applications. My name is Venkat Subramaniam. We'll talk a little bit about modernizing. We'll talk about the benefits. We'll talk about the challenges. And then we'll talk about some tools and the state of the tools. And then we will talk about maybe trying a few examples. And I do want to warn you that some of them will be a little bit bumpy because the tools are still in development and to various degree will get different benefits. So I'll show you demos where I am able to. Other places, we just have to wait for things to mature a little bit further. So when it comes to modernizing Java applications, one of the beautiful things that's happening now is that Java is on a 6-month release cycle. So as a result, we see Java development, we are quickly accelerating towards Java 24, and only a decade ago, we were in Java 8. And it's amazing to see the rate at which Java is moving forward. I know this room is dark, but I can still see if you raise your hand. So I'm going to ask you, and here's the beauty of a dark room. If you raise your hand, nobody will know who you are. So that's actually to the benefit. So raise your hand if you have code still in Java 8. Okay, I see a few hands going up. Okay, good. Java 11. Oh, okay, few. Java 17. Oh, that's good. Java 21. A few. Pre-Java 8. Okay, a couple of, okay, they're far away. That's good. Awesome. That's interesting. And of course, who here will not raise your hand no matter what I ask? Okay, all right. So we have Java in different versions, but the problem really is twofold. One is, if we are using older versions of Java, there are two significant disadvantages. The first disadvantage, I would say, probably a very important one from the business point of view, is if there are some security fixes that are available in newer versions, you are not being able to use those fixes. This, to me, is probably the #1 problem from a business point of view, is what is it that's available in production that you cannot use if you're not able to upgrade to it. The second benefit, problem to me is, as a developer, as a programmer, I want to be able to use the sharpest tools that are available on my hand. If I don't have access to a newer version, and if those newer versions have some really good features, then I'm deprived of using them. Maybe I'll add a third component to it. One of the things I'm a big fan of now in Java 21 to 24, 25 is the concept of virtual threads and the availability of structured concurrency. So to me, the reason I'm excited about virtual threads and structured concurrency is that those give us the ability for us to improve the production code in terms of asynchronous execution. So with very minimum code change, you're going to get really good benefits on the servers. So that's another thing I want to be able to really benefit from. But of course, we talked about the benefits of moving forward. You get to use a language with better features. You have a JRE that has better features, more secure. You have ability to use features that can make a big difference not only in development productivity, but also in productivity in deployment as well and in production. But of course, there are a few challenges we need to be aware of. One of the biggest challenges that I don't think any of the things I'm going to talk about today is going to help you with, but I often emphasize this. One of the biggest concerns I often have when I make change to the code is, what have I broken? So if you make a change to the code, and if something doesn't work as expected, we're in trouble. Now, this, of course, we know is a fear. But how do we address fear? We cannot address fear by just repeating what we do. We got to rethink about what we do. So if we have a fairly good amount of automated test, then we can get a feedback very quickly if what worked before is still working after the change. So if you have really good automated test, kudos, you're all ready for the process of refactoring to the modern versions. If you don't have a good automated test, and keep in mind, I'm not suggesting we need to have unit test. It'll be great if you have sufficient unit test, but I want to really have a combination of unit test, functional test, integration test, acceptance test, put everything together. If you're able to really get a quick feedback, that's really useful. If you don't have any automated feedback loop, you definitely want to be able to come up with enough test cases that you can confidently rely upon, and you need to be able to execute those test cases, whether manual or automated or combination of that, and be able to verify the behavior before and the behavior after. So that becomes absolutely essential. But having said that, other challenges are, you could be working in a team, you could be the smartest person on the team, that's great, but I would argue, no matter how smart we are, we cannot possibly know and possibly remember every single improvement that exists in the language. So I'll be absolutely honest about this to you. I spend time looking at and going through and writing about Java updates. And it's a very humbling experience for me. When I still discover things, I pause and say, I didn't know that. And that's okay not to know it, as long as we are not arrogant about thinking we know everything. So I always have this suspicion, maybe there are things I don't know about. And in all honesty, I just came across something 2 weeks ago in Java, and I said, oh, I didn't know that. And now I was kind of excited that such a thing exists. So that's one problem. The second problem is, you could be really good about this, but you could have a team of number of developers whose focus is not in keeping up with Java, for example. And when you ask the team to really upgrade to a newer version of Java, even though you may know most of it, they may not. That's another problem. A problem that follows that is, okay, we know what changes we want to make, but how do we actually make that change? The worst way to make change is to manually change it, because it's time-consuming, it's also very error-prone, and it can be very tedious, and it becomes very tiring for any human who has to go through and make those changes. And even worse, you might be working in a corporation where you have several projects that you want to upgrade. So now you have to go to every project, go to every single file, and look for the changes and upgrade it. That's extremely time-consuming. This can take multiple months, if not multiple years, for you to make that change. So there is the expense of that as well. This is one of the places where tools can help us a great deal. So what can tools do for us? A tool can help us to, A, quickly identify code that could help from modernization. You can have a tool that performs the upgrade. A tool can go modify things for you. And as a result, what may take a very, very, very long time for humans to do, a tool could possibly do within minutes, if you will, if not within seconds. So this is one of the reasons why we can rely upon tools. But keep in mind that the tools are exactly that. They are just tools that can do the work for you for what you're asking them to do. But that doesn't mean we can rely upon a tool and be done with it. Now, if you have a really flexible tool, the tool probably can be customized, and you can ask the tool to do a few different things for you. But even better, if you can actually extend the tool for your own purpose and intentions. And we'll talk about some of those here today as well. But the other problem you're going to deal with also is some of the tools that are available in the market today are definitely not consistent. So as a result, you may use a tool, but you may come back to use the same tool, and it may not give you the same result again. And that can be very frustrating. And when you're like, gosh, I used this before, it worked, but it doesn't work now, or works differently. There is yet another problem you have to deal with as well. When it comes to tools that can modify your code, I'm usually a bit suspicious of especially AI-related tools. I shouldn't say suspicious, I'm cautious, let me put it that way. So a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked me, I was in a gathering, and somebody said, oh, so you're in programming. I'm going to ask you a question, he said. What do you think of AI? Are you worried about it taking your job? And I said, I hope it does, honestly. So I can go do other more interesting things than to have to just keep writing the same code over and over. And then he said, what do you think of it? And here's my answer I gave to him. When I use AI for things I'm a novice, I'm in awe. When I use AI for which I'm an expert, I am totally scared. Because I look at what it does, and when I don't have a clue, I'm like, whoa, look at what it produced. But when I exactly know, and I look at what AI does, I'm like, are you serious now? And so this is one of the problems you have to be careful about. You cannot just click and walk away and assume what it creates is actually good. Here's something I find very funny in a sad way. I take a piece of, as an example, I take a functional style code with mutability in it, which is a code I would never allow any human to ever write if I ever want to talk to them again. And I take this code and I give it to AI and say, tell me what's wrong in this code. It's actually pretty darn good. It immediately tells me, you got side effect in the functional code. That's a very poor programming practice. It might work in the situation, but if you use parallel, this is all going to break. I'm like, that's pretty darn awesome. Then I take an imperative style code and tell AI to convert it to functional style. And it makes every mistake it told is wrong to do. And I'm like, are you serious now? Because if I take that very code and feed it back and say what's wrong, it tells me it's wrong. That's one of the problems you have to deal with. And I was teaching a course when I gave a problem and I told my developers in the room, go solve it yourself and go solve it using AI. And then I told them, this particular problem I'm giving you, no AI tool has solved it. And about 15 minutes later, one of the person in the room said, I'm really sorry to disappoint you, Venkat. You said no AI tool has solved the problem. Well, I found one that solved your problem really well. And I'm like, wow, let me take a look at it if you don't mind. And I look at the code, and it's the worst code ever. And it's the code that does mutation everywhere. It's a code that's overly complex, nevertheless in functional style. And then I looked at that person and said, this is a code nobody should ever write. And the person said, well, I don't know functional programming, but I just told it to create functional style. It did. And that's one of the things we got to be careful about. So just because it can spit code out, it doesn't mean it's actually good. Are there times it's good? Yes, there are. Are there times it's bad? Absolutely. But it's something we have to take the time to evaluate and say, is really useful code? Should I make it better? And that is something I think we should really pay attention to. So if you are a novice, this is dangerous. But if you are a really good critic, this is amazing. Because you can ask it to do the work, you can complain to it about it, and you can improve it by several fold as you work with it interactively. And at some point, if it doesn't really improve, that's when you can press that exit button and you can go off to do things on your own. Maybe it brought you about 90% of the way, and you can still benefit from that. There are other places where I find this to be really useful as well, but I'll stick really to this modernization. So let's think about this and give it a try. One tool I'm going to show you here is, probably you're familiar with this already, is a tool called Open Rewrite. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about Open Rewrite, then we will take a look at it. But Open Rewrite itself is a tool that can take your code base and it can make changes to your code base pretty quickly. It's a tool from Modern, and this is a tool that contains what are called recipes. There is a lot of recipes they provide, and there is a lot of recipes you can write yourselves or you can download and use as well. Some of the recipes are kind of very introductory. You may kind of wonder, is this really that useful? But to me, it is useful because if you look at just what the tool does on one project, it may not be that big a deal. But the beauty is, if you're in an enterprise with a lot of applications you maintain, you can unleash the tool at large and see it go ahead and update these things. You can integrate these tools as part of your CI/CD pipeline as well. So if somebody commits a piece of code that doesn't conform to your expectations, a recipe can automatically turn that code into what you want it to be, so that can be really useful as well. And one of the things about Open Rewrite is, while it gives you a lot of recipes already, one of the recipes that is relevant to what we're going to see here is a recipe that can upgrade your Java code from one version to another. And it literally upgrades it from, for example, 8 to 11, 11 to 17, 17 to 21, for example. Well, the minute you have a next LTS, and if you want to upgrade to that particular version, chances are the recipe will be up to date, and you can just run it and benefit from that. But in addition to that, though I won't go into that here today, one of the things that truly excites me about Open Rewrite is there are so many. I'm a person of nitpick. That's what I am. I want my code to do certain things in a certain way. And the problem is, oftentimes I inherit code base, others have written this code, and I look at it and I'm very unhappy. And you know, as a programmer, this is the worst way trying to go to bed, because you're trying to sleep, but that code that somebody else wrote keeps you awake. And you're like, I got to refactor the damn code, right? Well, the thing about this is, you can write your own recipes with Open Rewrite, and you can say, if you see this function with this particular call, then go ahead and replace it with this other call. There's already a recipe for that. Those are called method patterns. But you can also write your own recipe for more complicated things as well. Like if you're specifically looking for a certain situation in which a certain function call is made, you can ask it to modify that code. Essentially, what Open Rewrite gives you is literally a set of Java interfaces you can implement. As they analyze your code, they would call those interfaces and give you opportunity to do the transformation, the refactoring that you want. So for this, they use what's called LST. Well, we are used to AST. ASTs are abstract syntax trees. Well, the Open Rewrite uses LST rather than AST. Well, as the name alludes to, and the AST abstract syntax tree is really abstract. It tries to look at your code structure and manipulate and understand the structure of your code. But in this particular case, LST is a lossless syntax tree. The reason it's lossless is this not only remembers your code structure, it remembers every single detail about your code, like the comments you have in code, the indentations you have in code, as an example. So as a result, the last thing you ever want is to refactor the code and it modifies all your formatting and indentations. That's the best way to make you mad, isn't it? Well, LST remembers all the details, so you're not going to lose anything. So that's why it's a lossless syntax tree. So, of course, LST is more complex and time-consuming to build. So if you're unleashing it on a very large project, it might take quite long to run, and you may want to really partition this and run it based on what you're trying to do. They do have commercial solutions as well. I don't work for them. I'm not trying to sell you a product, but I'm always curious to see what things are. They do sell commercial products that can do a wider scale of that in a much faster scale as well. So if your company is really into several projects you want to transform, that's worth really considering as well. Well, when it comes to this, let's take a look at an example to just see how this is going to work. I don't have a large example because I just want to illustrate a little example to show how this actually works. So I have an original code that I've saved away, and I have a little code that I'm going to work with right here as well. So let's just take a look at the code before we go into the act of refactoring that code. Like I said, one thing I won't show you here, but I cannot emphasize enough, and if we had more time, I would actually show that to you here as well, is to really run the test. So typically what I have is a bunch of automated tests I run, and I make sure all the tests actually pass. This is one of the rules I often maintain. When somebody tells me, take a look at this code or help me on this code, the first thing I tell them is, let's run all the tests. If the tests fail, I don't touch it, because I don't want to inherit what's broken already. So once we fix that and make sure the tests are passing, it's a good time to come back and improve it. So make sure to have enough tests and then come back and work on these. So in this case, my code, like I said, is not a lot of code. I'm just going to show you a little example to illustrate this. So notice I have a person service, and the person service simply contains a very simple if and else code, as you can see. So it says, can I vote? If the age is greater than 17, you can vote. Otherwise, if you're 17, well, you can start voting next year. Otherwise, you cannot vote. So a little trivial code, but nevertheless shows us a little if and else construct. Then I have a person class, which is kind of verbose, and we can see that here as well. And then finally, I have a little bit more code. We have a name transformer, where the name transformer, as you can see, contains a join uppercase. That's an imperative style code, which I'm not a big fan of. But then you can see it's using, oh, you know what? Let me actually go back to, pardon me here. So it's essentially, I think I was playing with something here right before the talk, and I want to make sure I bring the original code. So let me try this again. So essentially, this is the a code that I have here with a few different things. Again, nothing really overly complicated, just a little example to illustrate what it can do for us. So essentially, in this particular case, we have a little code. I'm going to go back to that function again. So you can see, looks like I still have a newer version here. Anyway, so essentially, what I have here is the code. Yeah, so I apologize for it. So it's pulled in a wrong version of the code than the one I wanted to use. So give me a second to bring it in here. So anyway, so while I fix that, let me just talk about it. So essentially, the idea behind this is you want to be able to take your code, you want to refactor it, and when you're doing this, if you have the code, my recommendation is the tool is going to go run through and modify your code, and when it does that, you want to know what it changed. Now, obviously, you want to run your test. That's the first thing I would recommend. Run your test and make sure all your tests are still passing. If your tests are not passing, then what good is the refactoring? Well, remember one thing about refactoring. One of the tenets I follow is this. Automated test is, yes, please.
Yeah, you're asking when to rewrite your code, automatically rewrite your code. Is it just your production code, or is it doing your test code?
Oh, no. They're rewriting all your code that you wanted to rewrite. No, all your code. Yeah. So they're writing all your code. So they're not just focusing on test. The test.
I was worried they'd modify the test to pass, and they might neuter the test or make the test.
Right. So you can point to what you want to change, but you're going to unleash it and say, go change all of this. You're absolutely right. If your test changes, you could be in trouble, because how do you test your test, right? So definitely that's not your intention. But this is about changing the code. And the tests are simply there to give you feedback that your code is still working. So I would not ask it to modify my test, but you got to tell it what to focus on. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And if you do have a question or a comment, do raise your voice. I was kind of lucky that I was able to see you, but that's far my eyesight is going to show. So do raise your voice, and I'll listen to you. Thank you. So essentially, the idea in this case is you want to be able to run your test, and by running your test, you are able to get the feedback that your code is still working. But of course, if your code is still working, that's pretty awesome. And I want to make sure, I apologize again, I was playing with something before the talk, and I think I have messed up the example here, but we'll find the example I want to use, so we'll do that. So essentially the idea behind this is you want to be able to get the feedback that the code is still working. But once the code is working, what I'm going to then do is, when the test passes, then I want to do the diff and see it. So now I remember what I wanted to say. So one of the tenets I follow is that automated tests are safety net when it comes to refactoring. So the nice thing about automated tests is you can rely on automated tests to know that the code that worked is still working when you have these automated tests. So when you refactor your code, the question is, how do you know that the code that actually worked when you modified, refactored it, actually ended up breaking? Well, that's why you need these safety net for refactoring. The other thing you need from this is, I often say, I want to commit the code frequently and never refactor code that's not already committed into the repository. So in other words, if I'm in the middle of making a change to a code, I don't just jump in and refactor code. I don't do that. I'm disciplined to say, I have this refactoring in my mind. I'm going to jot it down on a piece of paper. I'll attend to it. I'll finish this change, whether fixing a bug or making an enhancement, and I will commit that change separately and then focus on refactoring. I often want my refactoring to be a separate commit into the system, not mixed with something else in my code. So that is something I quite often focus on to be sure that I don't mess up things while in the middle of refactoring. And when I do a diff on my Git repository, I want it to be absolutely clear what my changes are, so that becomes extremely important for me as well. So given this, and I'm going to see if this is the code I was looking for. So given this, you want to have those feedback loops to know that you are changing things properly. So I'm not using Git at this moment in this particular example, but oftentimes when I modify the code, I would simply use Git to find out what change I am making, and I can know right away if the change is working or not. All right, so that's good enough for our purpose. So I'm going to just make a copy of this before we go further, so we can just do a diff on my machine here. Okay, great. So the code I wanted to show you is the following. So let's go over to the name transformer, and what you can see here. Wow. Okay, never mind. So I'm really sorry, folks. This is really messing my mind here. I think I know. Okay, it's really hard to type and do the stuff at the same time. I'm reaching my limit here. Okay, just give me a second. I'm going to just focus on this. I'll get you the right code, and then we'll move forward. All right, so let me pull up this. Give me a second. There we go. Got it. Okay, so if it doesn't work this time, I quit. So, but it should be, I think. So let me pull that up, and I'll just save this away so I can do the diff. And I did not sacrifice to the demo gods this morning, so let's try this one more time. So anyways, going back to this, the whole idea here was to show that we can do this refactoring and see this. So here is a bit of a code, very imperative style, not a big fan of it, great. Then you have a get end names. The get end name says, get me the first element in this one. We all have written code like this at some point in our experience, right? So this says, you want the last one? Well, get the size first of all, and then do a -1 on it, and then go to that position and get the element. So we all have written code like that before. Nothing we are proud about, but we say that's life in the big city. What can we do? That's the API we have available. So I'm sure you have a lot of that code spilled in various places, right? Then, of course, that infamous plus equals that you often see. And this is not something you would put on your resume, right? You wouldn't say, I have 17 years of using plus equals, right? So that's kind of the code we often see, not something really exciting. Okay, so what can we do? So back to this, I'm going to ask for a certain recipe to be used here so we can benefit from that. So in this case, Open Rewrite gives you a couple of different options. If you are already using IntelliJ IDEA commercial version, they already have a plugin for Open Rewrite. I'm not selling that to you. Some of us may be using commercial version of IntelliJ IDEA already. If you are, this is already built into your IDE. If you're using the community edition, then this is not available through it. So what do you do? So IntelliJ IDEA commercial version is one option. If you're using Maven, you can use this from Maven. That's one other option. If you are using Gradle, there is a way to use this from Gradle as well. So you can pretty much use this if you're using Maven, Gradle, and any other IDE, including IntelliJ. So in this case, if you are interested in using this, so the question really is, how do we benefit from this? So I have a Maven project in this case. So let me just go over to show this POM file. So when you look at the POM file, you can see this is just like any other POM file, nothing really exciting. So in this particular POM file, as you can see, I already have brought in Open Rewrite. Just to illustrate this, I've got a bunch of simple examples here, just to illustrate how you can bring in some of the recipes. But once you add a plugin for openrewrite.maven, similarly for Gradle, you can then say, I want to bring in the Open Rewrite library, and you can ask for a certain recipes. Like I said, some of these are really simple recipes. So it's order import, so it just reorders all your imports. You can add a comment to a method, and I've said add a comment to a certain method, or go add a comment to a finalize method to tell my programmers to go refactor that code and work through it. So you can give some suggestions like that. So once you bring in the POM plugin through the POM, you can then say Maven, and you can ask for rewrite discover. So this basically gives you the opportunity to just take a look at all the different recipes that are available to you. And you can see the list is quite long. And the recipes are for different purposes. So for example, this is a recipe that I've just brought in, ignore that, but you have a recipe here sitting, you can just go through, there's a few recipes for GUI, there's a few recipes for HCL, there are a few recipes that are Java specific, as you can see, and add null method argument, add parameter, method parameter, so you can use that to do different changes, as you can see in this case. So there is about 2 to 3 dozen of these recipes very specific to Java that you can readily use. So if you want to use these recipes, you don't have to do much. You can just jump in and you can use them. But then you can see there are a few recipes for other languages as well. And this is a tool that's constantly evolving, and you can use this for what it provides for you. Right now, it seems more tilted towards Java plus a few other things. But as time goes on, I'm sure that will expand for more things as well. But those are the recipes that are potentially what you can use. But you can also see active recipes. These are the ones that I brought into my code, and I'm interested in using them. So going back to this, if I were to take this active recipes and get rid of them, so I don't care for those, let's say, and if I run this case, it'll still show me all the recipes available, but the active recipes are empty because I'm not bringing in any recipes to apply. So essentially, the active recipes are the ones that will execute when you do ask it to execute your recipes. So then the question is, what can we do to perform the transformation we want to perform? Well, let's go back to this Maven file for a minute. And if you look over here in this, you will notice that my code in this particular case is using version 11. So my Java version is 11, but I want to really convert it to Java 21. That's what I really want to do, right? So if you ask me, hey, looking at the code, what are the things you would change? I'll be absolutely honest about it. I have to go through every single line of code. I can identify maybe a few. There are others I may not even recognize. I may miss, I may forget, I may overlook. So a manual walk through the code is not going to be very efficient. I think we can agree on that. But I want to really go through and upgrade this from 11 to 21. How do I proceed to do that? Well, in order to do that, what I'm going to do here is to literally bring in the recipe, the recipe that I'm interested in. As it turns out, the recipe I'm interested in is not part of one of the standards that you saw over there. So if you ask me, show me the recipe in the list you saw, I'm going to say, sorry, it doesn't have it, right? So I'm going to change the configuration for that particular reason. So I'm going to go back to the POM file in here. And in the POM file, let's go ahead and look at the change I'm going to make. So I'm going to come down to the plugins again. And in the plugins section, I'm going to ask it to pull in the following. So I'm saying, here is Open Rewrite Maven plugin. And the active recipe I'm interested in bringing in is going to be a recipe which is called Java Migrate Upgrade to Java 21. So this one comes from a different jar you can get from Maven. And that's why you had to bring the dependency in here. So it's Open Rewrite Recipe. Rewrite Migrate Java is the name of that particular Maven, rather the library file. So you're referring to the dependency, where to pull that from, and then the recipe simply says, I want to apply that recipe. Again, just to emphasize this, I want to remove this for just a second, if you don't mind. Let's just not use that. So I'm going to go back and run the discover again. And this time around, when we run this, we should be able to see that one sitting among the available recipes because we just brought into the dependency. So it's going to discover that. So I'm going to just grep Java here. Let's see if instead I can see the rewrite as the one. So let's say this is going to be, let's just look for Java for a second and see if that list is smaller, and we can take a look at it. So essentially, this should have the active recipe, the recipes that are available, that should be in that list. If you look for it, there you go. So you can see those recipes sitting right there. That came in because I added the dependency. That's why you got those. So what are the dependency? What did it bring in? You have an upgrade to Java 8. So those two people in the back row can benefit from that, right? So we can move the old code to Java 8. That's great. You can celebrate that now. You're not condemned to stay with that version. You also have an upgrade to 11. You have an upgrade to 17 and an upgrade to 21. Now, one of the things they do is when I tell it to go from 11 to 21, they actually go through incrementally and evolve it. So that way, if there's any problem you run into in a step, at least you know where the problem was. But also because you may have a change that applies to a change in a previous version, but not all the way through. So they may have to really go through that incrementally. So you will see it goes from 11 to 17 to 21, and so on. But these things were not there before, and the minute we brought in the dependencies, they emerge at this point. So now I'm going to go back and say, but this is my active recipe I want to bring in. So I haven't saved it yet in this case, so let's try this without saving it, pardon me. So let's try this without saving it. So if I go back and discover, you will notice in this case, there's no active recipe. So this is one thing you need to decide what recipe you want to apply among the list of recipes that you have access to. So going back and running the discover again, you can see in this case it shows that recipe is being active. My recommendation always is do the discover, don't run it without it. The reason is if your typing skill is as bad as mine, you're going to introduce typos in there, wrong things in there, and if it's going to fail, I would proactively fix that failure before I attempt to run it, so that always helps. So now that we saw that, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and do the run and execute the rewrite at this point. So when I execute the rewrite, you can see it's going to run through, but it tells you that changes have been made to pom.xml. So going back to your question, right, not just the code, but it realizes the POM file is really pointing to an older version of Java. I'm going to go make a change to it. And then you can see it's upgrading to 17. And then it says, as part of this upgrade, I've modified that file right there. And it says, source main Java names transform has been updated. Then it goes from a 17 to 21 change as well, and tells you what files it's modifying in that process as well. This is a small example. Nevertheless, you can see the changes it's making. But before we go any further on this one, just for the sake of fun, I'm going to bring up the original code here, if you don't mind. And I have test as well, so I could have run the test to see if it's still working. But here's just for the sake of fun, I want to just take this code for a minute. Let's just only stare at this for a minute. We got a collective wisdom in this room. Don't feel insulted, because to be very honest, I cannot identify half of the things I'm going to show you here. But I want you to yell out a line number where you think there's going to be a change. 12. 13. What do you want to see change in 13? The plus equals, okay. Anybody else?
It'll get rid of the get. It'll be like a for loop.
Get rid of the get, use a for loop. Cool. This code, yell out a line number where it's going to change something. 38, you said? 28. What is it going to change in 28? Get first, right? So instead of get 0, it's going to do get first. Because now list has a get first function. What else is going to change? 24. I'm sorry, what did you say? Get last. Right? 25. It could be a list of.
It's going to delete the whole thing and make it a stream.
Maybe, okay. So, maybe convert this whole thing into a stream API. What about this? Maybe a text block. Okay. So, for some of you, you're going to say, wow. For some of you, you're going to say, really, that's it? I found that having low expectations in life is a good thing. Then you're absolutely happy every time, right? So it really depends on what's on your mind. But I will show you what it does. But here is the charm. Just because it does that doesn't mean that's the only thing it can do, right? You can write your own recipes. You can leverage third-party recipes other people create. And if you take the time to create a recipe, you can share it with others as well. So the tool has all the power to run through. It's just a question of adding more stuff to it, right? So with that said, let's go take a look what it provided for us. So I'm going to go over to that right there. So let's just go ahead and say, I want to look at the difference of that, for example, with source main Java COM Agile developer examples. Well, again, typically, when I'm using Git, I would just do a git diff at this point, and immediately it'll show me what is different. So let's take a look at what it showed. So you can see that it modified the locale to a locale.off, as you can see. it modified the get first and the get last right there and said we can replace those as well. I was a little bit like, I don't like this imperative style code. I wish it had modified it to a stream API, right? It doesn't do that. Then, of course, it doesn't change this one also. But at least at this point, I would say that's pretty darn good already in terms of identifying some functions and modifying it. And if you look at the POM file itself, remember we had a 11 earlier that was modified to 21 as well. And then you can look at a few other files in here that were modified as well to see if there are any other interesting changes. So for example, if I were to look at this, it didn't really go through and change that either, so we may need other tools to do this. Okay, so that's one option you can consider, but here's the good news. You can do that, and then you can say, all right, OpenRewrite got me this far, that's pretty good. I can use other recipes, I can create my own homegrown recipes, so it's well worth the investment to do that. But what else can I do? Well, this is where, again, the tools are quite different tools. I was tempted by Copilot, but unfortunately, their interface is broken, and it doesn't quite do what I want to show you here. But I'm going to try once, but I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. It's been a bit flaky in terms of how it works. So I'll explain to you what it did for me. You just have to trust that it did. And eventually, it may even do for you if you're nice to it. But let me show you what it is before I go into the code and show you. So in Visual Studio Code, I am using Copilot. And by the way, you can do this with Copilot and with other AI tools as well. But I'm a big fan of less effort, more results. And so in this case, I have an extension pack for Java. This extension pack for Java in VS Code is a way for you to run Java code and debug Java code within Visual Studio. But in this particular case, I am using a particular version of the plugin that gave that feature. And like I said, it worked, but it doesn't seem to work right now. But essentially, in this particular case, let me actually look up really quickly. I'm using a fairly older version of this. I'm going to see if I can switch to this and see if that actually helps. So let's try that. So while when it's doing, let me talk about it. So essentially, in this particular case, you can go to the code, and when you pull up your code, your project, what it is going to do is it's going to look at your code and give you an option. So I'm going to pull up the code we just saw a few minutes ago, and we saw a few things we could have done better, and we're going to look at the code. And at this point, if the tool was working properly, you will see a little icon here. They call it the lenses, and it'll tell you, do you want to refactor this class to the modern version of Java? Which to me is an amazing feature if it works. And like I said, I've used it before, but it's pretty flaky. But when you click on it, they're telling different things, so I'm not sure which one is accurate. I heard somebody say Copilot uses different tools, including OpenRewrite. So what we saw earlier is also a tool that they use internally here, that there may be some truth to it. But they're using different tools here. But what you can do here is, if that was working for me properly, I would click on it, and it would immediately jump over to the function and say, do you want to refactor that function? And you say yes, and it will swallow the code here and spit it out using more modern code. To me, I like that feature because I don't have to manually engage the tool for every single function. And it's very promising. And like I said, it worked for me with one of the versions, but for some reason, with a combination of tools, it seems to be a bit broken right now. I'm going to try this one more time before I give up on that one, just to see if any of these versions were to kick in and work, but I'm not really sure about it. So anyway, so that's one thing to really think about. The other is, if you say, okay, but what if I don't have access to the tool? From what I know so far, the Copilot is, this was announced, what, 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. They made Copilot totally free of charge to use. However, from my understanding, there is a limitation to the number of queries you can make. I don't know the exact number, so I won't code it for you, but it's a relatively large number, but it depends on how much you use it actually. So if you hit those limits, you can purchase for more requests. That's one option. You could also use the other tools as well, depending on which IDE you're using and so on, and you can decide on which one to use. So I think it might be related to the Java runtime as well. Invalid Java runtime for Java 11, it says. So that could be a problem as well. So I'm going to just quit that and change it to 11 and try this one more time, just to see if that actually helps. So that's one option. But I want to show you something else here. In spite of that, you can also use this to, for example, you could say, I want to run this. Let's see if that change alone makes it work, but we'll see. So in addition to this, you can also try to run this manually as well. So for example, if you're interested, you could say, take this particular function and rewrite it for me in functional style, and you may get some results out of it. So anyway, I'm going to leave that as, again, it's really, really flaky. So here's an idea. You could go back to this and say, can you rewrite the following function? You could say following function in functional style. So you could make queries to that effect. And again, it depends on my internet connection and things like that. But if that works, you could try to put in those prompts, and I've seen that to be effective in changing the code on the fly. It would just rewrite that code, and then we'll show you what the code is doing immediately after. So let's see what it said right here. So it's telling me that's the for loop. That definitely doesn't look like functional style. So that's the part I said in the beginning of the session as well. It can be somewhat unpredictable in terms of what it does. So using stream, let's say, API, fine. So there you go. So you can see it rewrote it with that. And again, I've kind of had a mixed success with it. There are times it does a fairly decent job. I'll be absolutely honest about it. There are times when I ask it to do stuff, and I'm like, wow, I didn't think of that. And that's pretty darn good. When those things happen, it makes me very happy. But then it also writes code like, no way. So it's a mixed bag at this point. Does it have potential? I think it does. Will I bet my money on it today? Not yet. But I think it definitely has good potential to where it can take us. So that's one option. Similarly, if I come back to this code, I'm going to say, again, like I said, if the tool was working, I would be just clicking and going to next function, next function. But since I don't have that, can you rewrite? No, I don't want to do that. So can you rewrite the following function using, let's say, text block, right? So using text blocks. So you can ask it to rework the function using text blocks. You would probably assume that I'm lying, but like I said, it depends on the internet connection, a lot of things that it expects to happen. So it's not really very reliable, depends on the connection, how it works. So I'm going to just maybe hope it is able to kick in and do the job. Let's see. So, and again, like I said, there are times when it does a really remarkable job. There are times when it doesn't. So let me try this one more time. And that was evidence, right? It at least did it once. So, and like I said, I'm a little disappointed that that particular feature is not really working in recent versions. But if it does become available, I think that will be a really good game changer in the long run. So I'm going to just give it a second, but you just have to take my word for it. So essentially, the idea here is, even though I showed you very small examples, there's a lot of potential for it. It's an opportunity for us to invest some time on it. And one of the things that truly excites me about this is, it is a nice way to fill the knowledge gap. I don't have to know everything. I can try to know everything, but it's impossible for me to know everything. I can have a team of developers. I don't have to expect them to know everything, but I can task them to go do the modernization, and then I can review it. So there's a lot of potential. In all honesty, I'm a big fan of putting more effort into open rewrite and write more my own recipes. So that's something I've been focusing on recently. And with the combination of that and different AI tools, I think we got a potential. Like I said before, it's not something I would totally rely upon and say, I don't need people anymore, the tool can do it. We're not there yet. I don't know when we'll be there. But this is a good combination to employ. Please.
Does it also rely on like a Spring Boot when you try to upgrade to a different version?
Spring, you are saying?
A Spring Boot.
Yes. So it does have plugins. It can work with Spring Boot. It does a fairly decent job for both Spring Boot, Spring applications. Absolutely. So if you have a lot of Spring projects, you will definitely benefit from that as well. That's all I have. Hope that was useful. Thank you.